Hello and welcome to this digital camera magazine video tutorial. Today we're going to show you how to replicate the effect of an ND filter. Now ND stands for neutral density and basically enables you to keep your shutter open longer so you can get a longer exposure and capture some of the movement that is in the scene. So here, for example, we have our watermill in the background and we have the running water. And if we just take a look at the effect that an ND filter would have and the effect we're going to try and replicate today, we can see that all of the leaves within the trees have become blurred. So we've captured the movement of the leaves and we've kept the watermill in the background. Obviously the rocks and the tree chunks here are remaining in focus and quite nice and sharp. So that's basically the effect of an ND filter. Now you'll come across two different types. The most common that people use is the graduated ND, and this basically enables you to get two different exposures, one for the sky and one for the ground, but all in one shot. So the sky is a couple of stops darker than the ground, and it basically evens up high contrast situations. The less common is the solid ND filter, which basically just enables you to keep your shutter open a little bit longer than you would normally due to light conditions, and that basically would get a very similar result to this. Okay, so getting started, we click back on the before picture, and as always we're just going to duplicate the background layer. So if you just drag and drop that onto the new layer icon, and you'll see background copy appear above your background layer. Now what we're going to do is just to apply a filter onto that, a blur motion filter. So if you go up to filter, down to blur, and then we're going to select motion blur. Right, first thing to do is we're going to put an angle on that of about 47. And we're going to have a distance of 90. So we're going to get quite a nice long blur, and you can see that streaking away in the preview window there. If you want to just go around and check it, not that there's much need, just click in the preview and left click in the preview, and you can move the preview window around. If we just click OK, and we can now see our whole image is a little over blurry, and what we're going to do is take our opacity for that layer down to about 65. We can use the slider, or if you just click on the text you can actually just type in 65%. Quite a nifty feature within Photoshop Elements 5 is how you can actually cheat a layer mask, and to do this we're just going to go to New Adjustment Layers, click once, and we're going to select Levels, and instead of actually adjusting our levels in any way at all, we're just going to click OK. And now we've got our new adjustment layer above our background copy layer, but the result of that, if you just click the visibility on and off, is doing absolutely nothing. Now what we're going to do with that is just drag that below our background copy layer. So if you just click on the adjustment layer icon, drag that below the background copy, and now what we're going to do to cheat that adjustment layer is just hold the Alt key down and click just in between the background copy layer and the levels layer, and when you drag your mouse or your cursor to that point, you should see the icon or the cursor icon just change. Just click once and you'll see a little arrow coming out of the left hand side of the thumbnail in your background copy layer. Okay, with the cheat layer mask created, just make sure that you click into the adjustment layer mask thumbnail and go up to edit, and we want to just fill the layer. So if you click fill layer, make sure the contents is black, and we've got mode, blending mode normal, opacity 100%, and just click OK, and you'll see the mask thumbnail has now completely filled with black, and the effect of that is to actually remove all of that motion blur that we applied to that background copy layer. Now to enable that to shine through, what we're going to do is make sure that in our tool palette we set our foreground colour to white. We're going to select our brush tool, and a brush tool of about 600 pixels should be fine, and what we can do is just paint over the leaves to start to bring through that blurring effect. What we want to do is just be very careful that we don't paint over the tree trunks or any of the static areas of the image. So as we work around, we can change the actual size of our brush using the bracket tools. To make the brush go larger, we can just use the right hand bracket key, and to make it go smaller, we can just use the left hand bracket key. So two very handy keyboard shortcuts. So with the size of about 600, our brush is set with a foreground colour of white. We can now just start to paint over all of the leafy areas of the image. Now it's a good idea just to really be a little bit careful with this, and the more accurate you are whilst painting over, the better the result is going to be. So I'm just going to very quickly paint over these leaves. I really would take a little bit more time over this than I will do, but for the purposes of illustration, a little speed is required. You may find that some of the smaller areas it's quite a good idea just to zoom in and just hold down your space bar, and doing that you can very quickly just zoom around the picture and select some of the more tricky leafy areas. And for accuracy, zooming in is definitely a good idea. So we'll just quickly go through the image, a little bit more up there, a little bit here on the trees. Don't worry if you go over a little bit. If you were using an ND filter, you would get a slight blurring where the leaves are going over the static areas, but try not to go over too harshly. And again, with the tree trunks, you want to be careful because they wouldn't move a great deal, so you want to try and leave those just a little bit in focus. Okay, once you're happy with the effect, we're already getting a little bit of movement, but the trees wouldn't just be moving in one direction. So what we want to do now is to again duplicate the background layer, and this time we're going to make another motion blur but going in the opposite direction. So click onto your background layer, again drag that into the new layers option, and you'll see background copy layer 2. And what we want to do is apply an opposite blur to the blur we applied to the original copy layer. So making sure that's selected, we'll go up to Filter, Blur and Motion Blur. We're going to choose -47, and you see the blur suddenly goes in the opposite direction. And we're going to increase the distance to 100 pixels. Once we're happy with that, we're going to click OK and reduce the opacity of that layer right down to 50%. Okay, and just as before, we're going to cheat ourselves a layer mask. So we go up to Adjustment Layers, Levels. Just click OK. We're not actually going to make any adjustments. Drag that Levels Adjustment layer below our background copy 2. Hold down our Alt key. Wait for the cursor to change as we go just in between the two layers, and left click. We should see that little arrow appear. Make sure you click into your layer mask thumbnail, and you know when you have because it'll suddenly become outlined. Go up to Edit and Fill Layer. Make sure content is black and click OK. As soon as you do that, you'll see the effect of the motion blur disappear. And then making sure that you've got white again selected as your foreground colour. Go up to your brush tool, make sure again you've got that selected. Select quite a large brush again, we're going for 600 pixels, and as we did before, we're just going to start painting over the leaf areas. And again, once we get into the more detailed areas, we want to decrease the size of that brush so that we don't destroy some of that static detail. Now, if you do find that you've painted over one of the trees, so I'll just zoom in there, and we've just overdone it a little bit, we want to sort of bring back a little bit of that detail. What we can do is we can just flip the brush over, and we've got our foreground colour now set to black. We're just going to choose a smaller brush and painting in a bit of that trunk detail and removing some of that motion blur. Now do be careful when you're doing this. It is quite a creative technique and does take a while to get the actual result that you're after. Okay, once you've finished removing the areas or painting over the layer mask for that bottom layer, just select the lower blur layer. Then what we're going to do now is just to give the levels a bit of a tweak. So if I go up to Enhance, Adjust Lighting and Levels, I'm just going to give the levels just a little bit of a tweak, just to add a little bit more vibrancy to some of those midtones. Once I'm happy, I'm just going to click OK, and the last thing I need to do is just flatten the image. So if I click More and Flatten Image, and we'll flatten all of those layers down together, and then we're ready to print. Okay, so that's how to replicate the effects of an ND filter within Photoshop Elements 5.